You are watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David, and breaking news, shelter-in-place orders in effect as Hurricane Milton just hours away now from making landfall right near Sarasota, Florida as a Category 3 storm. Much of the Florida peninsula has already been dealing with tropical storm force winds, with hurricane force winds approaching right now. And we want to give you a live look over Sarasota, or at least what you can make of it. It's in the path of the eye, coming later today, and you can barely see the town because, of course, the rain and the winds have already picked up some steam. Milton has sustained winds at about 125 miles per hour. Some level of evacuation orders were issued to 35 of the 67 counties in Florida. 15 counties with about 7 million people had mandatory orders to leave. Today, President Joe Biden thanked those who have followed local guidance to evacuate ahead of the landfall.
I know it's really tough leaving behind your home, your belongings, everything you own. But I urge everyone in Hurricane Milton's path to follow all safety instructions as we head to the next 24 hours. It's literally a matter of life and death.
Biden also condemned the spread of misinformation related to recovery efforts, calling it reckless and irresponsible. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell will be in Tallahassee tonight working with state officials to make sure they have what they need. She says the agency is focused and ready to support the people of Florida. And we do know already a tornado has touched down today in Fort Myers, Florida. It knocked down trees and power lines and damaged some homes along the way. There are no reports of casualties at this time. Another tornado was spotted along I-75 in Broward County. The entire southern half of the Florida peninsula remains under a tornado watch until at least 9 p.m. tonight. This covers 12 million people, including residents of Tampa, Miami, Cape Coral, and Key West. And another potential hazard this hurricane poses is one that is not as common. It is worrying about the debris that's been left over from last week's Hurricane Helene. All of these items left outside, none of them bolted down, all of them can become a projectile weapon as these excessive winds come whipping through. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis says they recognized this threat and tried to get ahead of the problem as much as they could over the weekend.
So you had a major hazard on barrier islands in Pinellas, Manatee, and Sarasota County. So this weekend, I authorized mandated 24/7 debris removal. They were able to remove 55,000 cubic yards of debris.
And as the storm passes over Florida, the flooding risks cross the state from the Gulf Coast to the Atlantic coast. From Tampa all the way to Cape Canaveral, there's at least a 70% chance of flash flooding over the next few days. And this could be significant as recovery crews attempt to enter the areas that are hit the worst by hurricane winds. Disney World and other Orlando theme parks temporarily closed this afternoon ahead of the storm. We do want to go live now to Orlando, where Gracie Johnson has been talking with residents on how they are preparing for the worst. Gracie?
Yes, so many people that I spoke with earlier today, they were doing their last minute preparations, putting the boards on their windows, sandbags in the doorways, things like that. And many people also said they had family and friends evacuating from the coast of Florida that's getting hit the hardest to stay with them here in Orlando. Now, you can see that the wind is picking up. The rain has slacked off for the time being, but as it gets later into the night, we can definitely feel that storm is getting closer to us here in Orlando.
And Gracie, with millions of people having left their homes in preparation, what kind of shelter opportunities are there, and are people taking advantage of that?
So we were able to visit some of the shelter areas that are being offered here in Orlando. Many high schools, middle schools, elementary schools in the area have opened up their gyms and things like that to allow people to shelter there. When we were there this afternoon, there were just over 200 people already there prepared for sheltering at that location. They said they anticipated there to be close to 400 people before the night was over tonight.
We are hoping as many people as possible can get to a safe place, including you, Gracie. Thank you so much for that live report out of Orlando. And we do want to also give you a live look at Clearwater. This is just north of Tampa. The waves picking up as the storm surge along the coast, already becoming elevated with Milton now approaching. The National Weather Service says that the peak storm surge in some areas south of Tampa could be as high as 9 to 13 feet above ground. And to visualize what that really looks like as the waters rise on the coast, we want to show you Chief Meteorologist John Gum with the National Weather Desk.
Well, it's that push of water that comes in advance of the hurricane and as the hurricane makes landfall. You think of the winds out ahead of this thing blowing that water toward the coast, and that water piles up. The stronger the hurricane, the stronger the storm surge can be. So let's take a 3-foot storm surge, for instance, here. That comes up to the dune line along many beaches, may cause damage to the beaches. But when you start to get into the higher storm surge, maybe a storm surge of around 6 feet, which is going to be pretty common, it looks like, into the Tampa Bay area, that's when you start seeing flooding of homes adjacent to the water, adjacent to the coast here, especially on the first floor. The 12-foot storm surge not just inundates the lower levels of structures adjacent to the coast, it can inundate the upper floors, the second floor of these structures. And this storm surge is the most deadly part of a hurricane. It kills more people than any other aspect of the storm. And this is going to be a danger in Florida as this storm makes its way toward the coast.
John, thank you. And stay with us as we continue to track developments on Hurricane Milton throughout the night. We're going to have coverage for you both on air and online at thenationaldesk.com. New presidential polls show Vice President Kamala Harris still leads former President Donald Trump nationally. An Economist YouGov poll out today has Harris leading Trump 49 to 45%. The latest 538 average has Harris leading by 2.5 points. While the vice president focuses on Hurricane Milton, Trump is campaigning in Pennsylvania, speaking in Scranton earlier today before a rally tonight in Reading. The VP nominees are both in Arizona. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz attending a Veterans and Military Families event near Phoenix, and also having a rally in the Tucson area tonight.
Sometime this afternoon, Hurricane Milton's going to come ashore. And those are Americans. Those are our neighbors. Those are our family members. Those are our friends. And the commitment to stop the politicking and to unify, to be there, is absolutely critical.
Ohio Senator J.D. Vance also held a rally in Tucson and is now at a CPAC town hall in Mesa.
Why do we have such an incompetent administration? Disaster relief ought to go to prepare and to respond to a disaster when it strikes American territory. Our government has got to focus on our citizens.
And tonight, Fox News making a last-ditch effort to host a final debate between the presidential candidates. The network saying today that it invited Trump and Harris for a debate on the 24th or 27th. Trump has already rejected a separate invitation from CNN, who offered a debate this week that was accepted by Harris. U.S. Supreme Court justices heard oral arguments today on whether or not to spare Oklahoma death row inmate Richard Glossip. Glossip was convicted of murder back in 1997 and has been given his last meal 3 times at this point. What makes today's hearing interesting is Oklahoma state prosecutors are also arguing Glossip's sentence should be stayed because there are questions about exculpatory evidence withheld in the initial trial. The Oklahoma Supreme Court has ruled the execution must move forward. A final ruling is expected in early 2025. A third farm worker in California has tested positive for bird flu as 2 other cases remain under investigation. The infections were believed to have resulted from contact with dairy cows. This is the 17th human case in the United States since March. In all 3 California cases, there appears to be mild symptoms, but investigators are ramping up efforts to follow the spread of this virus, which can be lethal. Dozens of herds in California have been impacted so far, with up to 15% of cows dying from the infections, according to the California Dairy Quality Assurance Program. The Boeing working strike now on day 27, and the company has withdrawn its latest offer to the union. The CEO said that Boeing made new proposals during a third round of bargaining, but that the union made non-negotiable demands. The union claimed that Boeing refused to propose wage increases and was set on standing on the non-negotiated offer from September 23rd.
Well, there wasn't really an offer to begin with. They kind of just threw it out to the media and they didn't go to the negotiating committee. I'm not surprised.
The union vowed to continue the strike. Boeing said this could cost the company $3.5 billion. Coming up, what investigators found when searching through the records of the Afghan national suspected of planning an election day terrorist attack. Then the dangerous reason almost 2 million Hondas are being recalled, plus what we know about the models impacted. And later, the movie-inspired Halloween displays a Rhode Island man has built in his yard for the second year in a row. We'll be right back. Live look here at Tampa, Florida, as Hurricane Milton bears down on the coast. Like Sarasota, you can't really see all that much, and that's because the rain has already started to cloud the camera. This is going to be the second hurricane to hit Florida in less than 2 weeks, the third to do so in just 2 months. Stay with us here as we continue to cover the latest as the eye approaches, with landfall expected later tonight or tomorrow morning. President Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held their first phone call since August. Vice President Kamala Harris also joining in on that call. The conversation comes as Israel weighs how to respond to Iran's recent ballistic missile attack in a war on the brink of widening. Tonight, Israel expanding its ground incursions in northern Gaza and Lebanon as Hezbollah, the militant group controlling Lebanon's south, fires rockets into Israel, 2 of which killing 2 civilians, as Netanyahu warns Lebanon of destruction, quote, similar to what we see in Gaza. The State Department tonight responding to Netanyahu's words.
We cannot and must not see the situation in Lebanon turn into anything like the situation in Gaza. That would, of course, not be acceptable. It is up to the Lebanese people, not anybody else, to decide on who their government is.
Meantime, in Gaza, more than a dozen dead in an Israeli strike on the only fully functioning hospital in the enclave's north. IDF forces say the facility was harboring Hamas militants without providing any evidence. Israel has blamed civilian deaths on Hamas. But a year into a bloodied war, Palestinian civilians say they can barely survive. This video shows the most recent casualties in Gaza. The death toll today exceeded 42,000, according to health officials on the ground. Gaza's health ministry does not distinguish between fighters and civilians, but has said that women and children make up more than half of those killed. This as more than 9 in 10 Gazans, almost 2 million people, have been displaced and more than half in the enclave now face catastrophic hunger. And tonight we are learning more about the Afghan citizen living in Oklahoma City, charged with conspiring to conduct an election day terrorist attack in the United States. The National News Desk's Tom Ferguson has a look at the man's motive and the actions he took to pull it off.
27-year-old Nasir Ahmad Tawhidi, pictured here, lived in an apartment building on Chartel Avenue right here in Oklahoma City with his wife and one-year-old child. Officials say he was working with a co-conspirator, an unnamed juvenile who lived on Sunrise Drive and more with his father, mother, and siblings. Documents showed the two envisioned themselves as martyrs and planned to target large gatherings of people on Election Day. As of right now, investigators have not revealed any of the locations they were planning to target. Investigators reported finding numerous Islamist terror propaganda images in Tawhidi's electronic records. Those include the destruction of the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001, and a headless Statue of Liberty. Officials believe Tawhidi was planning his actions far in advance. Court documents reveal he sold off the family home, rehomed the family pets, and booked one-way tickets for his wife and child to Afghanistan. The two suspects were arrested on October 7th in rural Oklahoma. Documents showed they tried to purchase 2 AK-47s, 10 magazines, and 500 rounds of ammo from FBI assets. Investigators say they found these pictures of Tawhidi posing the same way ISIS terrorists do, and discovered the man gave at least $540 to a Syria-based organization that funnels money to the terror group. Records show Tawhidi arrived in the U.S. on September 9th, 2021 on a special immigrant visa and is currently on parole status pending adjudication of his immigration proceedings. Documents showed the minor co-conspirator entered the U.S. on March 27, 2018 on a special immigrant visa.
Tom Ferguson reporting there. The federal budget deficit has climbed to $1.8 trillion, up from last year's $1.7 trillion. The Congressional Budget Office says tax revenue is not keeping pace with the rising cost of government programs, and the interest is just mounting. This as the national debt approaches $36 trillion.
Unsustainable. At some point, we're going to run out of other people's money, and the people we're borrowing from, some of our foreign creditors like Japan and China, by the way, will stop loaning us money to pay for an ever-growing government.
Republican Congressman Jody Arrington's hawkish position at odds with what economists expect from a Trump administration. The CBO shows the deficit higher with Trump back in the White House and slightly lower under Harris. 5 people are dead after a plane crash on Catalina Island in California. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office said a small twin-engine Beechcraft 95 crashed shortly after leaving Catalina Airport last night. The weather was mild and clear at the time. The Federal Aviation Administration and National Transportation Safety Board are investigating. 1.7 million Hondas. That's how many cars are being recalled because of a possible steering problem that stems back to 2021. The gearbox and spring in the models listed on your screen right there, they could be defective, causing more friction when you're trying to turn the wheel. That could increase the risk of a crash. Owners will be notified and dealers will offer free repairs. A draft list of 101 generic drugs that would cost $2 or less through Medicare under a pilot program has now been revealed. The government wants to see if offering cheap generics can improve seniors' health and help them budget better. The program wouldn't start until at least 2027, but you can see the medication list and submit feedback on the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services website. The plant that supplies more than half of the IV fluids to hospitals in the United States is about to shut down due to the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Medical reporter Liz Bonas shares what's being done to meet national demand.
Hey there, everybody. Federal officials announcing today that they are working to help make sure that hospitals have enough IV bag supplies.
It's all because Baxter, the North Carolina company that supplies bags of IV fluids for healthcare providers, is so damaged from Helene, it can't produce the needed supply.
We are experiencing reduced shipments now.
This is leading some of the largest health systems nationwide to do what Ohio's TriHealth president and CEO Mark Clement and Chief Medical Officer Dr. Helen Kaselka call smart conservation tactics.
We're switching people to oral medication when we can. If they can take fluid, or if they can take by mouth, we're going to give them whatever they can, medicines or fluid by mouth. That's kind of a simple thing. We're also looking at how we compound medications with less fluid. And
just like in COVID-19, local, state, and national command centers are being set up.
We share nationally, we share locally.
This helps health systems communicate about what's being directed where.
Their production actually accounts for about 60% of IV fluids across the country. So that's a large amount. About 85% of the IV fluids in the state of Ohio come from this company. They announced this morning that they think they are able to supply more, but we're monitoring that. And with Milton coming now, we might have something else we have to monitor. So we're very aware of that as well.
As for what was announced today to help meet demand?
The allocation that they put in place immediately following the disruption of that plant operation at 40% of previous supplies, we're going to go to 60% by the end of October, and they expect by the end of this year, in December, to be back to pretty much full capacity. So,
if you have concerns about an upcoming procedure or ongoing care, reach out to your own primary care doctor. With your health news, I'm Liz Bonus reporting.
All right, Liz, thank you. Coming up, how the city of Seattle is trying to recruit more people into its police department despite public backlash. We'll be right back. And a live look right now over Hudson Beach, Florida, where you can really just see the wind and the effect of large rain taking root over there in Florida, where they are expecting a monster of a storm. Of course, expected landfall officially hours away now, but already we're really starting to see it pick up. The winds pick up, the rain picks up. So we're going to continue covering this all evening long for you. Make sure to keep it right here with the National News Desk. And we do have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America, and we begin in Seattle, where there's a new effort underway to bolster the police department.
Seattle police are short hundreds of officers, and 2 years of hiring bonuses have not refilled the ranks.
6 in favor, 1 opposed.
Thank you very much. The bill passes as amended.
Now, the City Council hopes $50,000 hiring incentives will be enough to lure officers to Seattle.
And I think what it shows is that this council is moderate, and they want to resurrect public safety in this city.
Mike Solon heads the Seattle Police Officers Guild. The city also faces internal pressure, with critics of the incentives saying they're a waste of money, especially when the city is scrambling to deal with a $240 million budget shortfall.
We already give them, how much are we giving them a year? Let's see, this new budget proposal, $457.9 million.
The place the Reese family called home in Fresno for over 7 years is now gone. Everything that makes a home a total loss. You're seeing it there burned to the ground, melted, or in ashes. Frank Reese says a fire broke out in the attic Friday. Fire crews were able to contain most of it up there.
We went in and looked, and they told us it was not livable. So we had already grabbed in a few things prior to meeting with the Red Cross.
He says they were supposed to pack up their things the next day, but the house caught fire again. Now the family is left without a place to call home and their personal belongings. Now they're hoping to find a new place to rent and any help they can get.
Steven Simino is putting finishing touches on his annual larger-than-life homemade Halloween display along Benjamin Drive. And this year's theme, 5 Nights at Freddy's.
Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, where fantasy and fun come to life.
When the movie came out, I watched it, and it reminded me of my childhood Chuck E. Cheese.
If you haven't heard, it's a horror video game turned movie that millions have come to love. That includes his own daughter, Antonia.
I love it. I'm such a big fan of it. I get giddy every time I come home and I just see more and more onto the lawn.
Last year, Simino and his daughters transformed their front lawn into a scene straight out of the Netflix series Stranger Things. And staying on the topic of Halloween, coming up, the new American Girl doll creations that will add some historical flair to your Halloween this year. Calling all millennial girls. This Halloween, you can ditch the horror and tap into your inner child. The American Girl doll brand, which saw its book series and doll collection popularized in the 80s and 90s, has teamed up with Rubies to create American Girl-inspired costumes for adults and children alike. You can choose from original favorites, 1854's Frontier Girl Kirsten, 1904's Samantha, or 1944's Molly, just to name a few. And they retail for $40. So if you can't chalk up the $125 it costs for an actual doll, well, this is another great way to have some fun. Keep it with us right here as we track Hurricane Milton as it prepares to make landfall. Have a wonderful night.